Have you noticed how sometimes, when a man seems more in love than ever, suddenly begins to move away? It is such a common phenomenon that has baffled women for centuries. What if I told you that this behavior does not necessarily mean disinterest? That, in fact, it could be a sign that their feelings are deep and genuine. Welcome to a trip through the male mind, where we will explore why the distancing is sometimes the most authentic form of love that a man can express. If you have ever felt confusion at the distance of your partner, this video will solve many of your doubts. Stay until the end, because what you will discover could completely transform the way you understand your relationships. Human relationships are complex, full of nuances and contradictions that often challenge our logical understanding. One of the most disconcerting paradoxes is how love can manifest through distancing. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychologist, deepened in this phenomenon through his study of the unconscious and the psychological dynamics that govern our relationships. We are scheduled to find a connection, to interpret the proximity as a sign of love and distance as rejection. However, male psychology works differently from what many women expect. What seems to be indifference can actually be an internal process necessary for the man who is experiencing intense emotions. If you are in this situation, where your partner or the man who interests you seems to go back just when things were going well, it is natural to feel confusion, even pain. But what you are experiencing could simply be the result of different ways of processing emotions and connection. In this video, we are going to dismantle this mystery. We will see why men move away when they feel intense love, how women react to this departure, and most importantly, what can we do to navigate this dynamic in a healthy way? It is not about manipulating or playing emotional games, but about understanding the fundamental psychological needs that we all have and how they manifest differently according to our genre and personality. Emotional distance in men is a widely documented phenomenon, but frequently misunderstood. To understand why it happens, we must first recognize the fundamental differences in how men and women process intense emotions. From an evolutionary and neurobiological perspective, the male brain is structured to compartmentalize experiences. When a man begins to develop deep feelings by someone, these feelings can be overwhelming. Unlike many women, who tend to process emotions through connection and communication, men often need to retire to understand what they are feeling. Carl Jung explained it through the concept of psychological introversion. According to Jung, when we experience intense emotions, part of our psychic energy is directed inwards. In the case of men, this introversion can manifest itself as a physical or emotional distancing. It is not a rejection, but an adaptation mechanism. Imagine this situation. Wonderful weeks have spent together. Every moment seems perfect. The connection is undeniable. And precisely when everything indicates that the relationship advances towards something more serious, he begins to space his messages, cancel plans, or looks mentally absent when they are together. This behavior may seem contradictory, even cruel from the outside. But from the male perspective, this distancing fulfills several essential psychological functions. First, it allows you to process the vulnerability that comes with falling in love. Culturally, men have been conditioned to see vulnerability as weakness. When they feel they are losing control of their emotions, distancing provides them with a space to reconcile these feelings with their identity. Second, it gives them the opportunity to evaluate whether they are prepared for the commitment that implies a deep relationship. Contrary to what many believe, most men do not make the decision to commit emotionally. When they feel they are developing significant feelings, they often need time to make sure they are prepared for the responsibilities that it entails. Third, distancing can be a form of self-protection. The fear of rejection is universal, and when a man feels vulnerable, he can move away temporarily to protect himself from the potential emotional pain. It is important to note that this behavior occurs mainly in men who are genuinely interested. A man who simply seeks a superficial connection will rarely invest the emotional energy necessary to experience this type of internal conflict. The paradox is that often, the deeper its feelings, the more pronounced its initial distancing can be. Jung also talked about shadow, that part of us that contains aspects that we consider unacceptable or threatening for our self-image. For many men, intense feelings of love and emotional dependence are part of this shadow. Temporary distancing is the process by which they try to integrate these aspects of themselves that find difficult to accept. This phenomenon is also related to what modern psychologists call the cycle of male intimacy. It is a pattern in which men approach emotionally to some extent, then retire to process the intimacy reached, and then return to a deeper level of connection. It is as if they needed to step back to be able to go forward. Signals of this type of distancing are subtle but recognizable. You may notice that you avoid making future plans after an intense period of connection, or maybe their messages, although they are still affectionate, arrive less frequently. It might seem worried or distant when they are together, as if part of it were elsewhere. These are indicators that it is processing emotions, not that it has lost interest. Understanding this mechanism does not mean that you should accept behaviors that hurt or contradict your fundamental needs in a relationship. However, recognizing that distancing can be part of how many men process love allows you to respond more informed and less reactive. Jung emphasized that true personal and relational growth occurs when we understand and accept both our own internal processes and our partner. This mutual understanding is the basis of deepest and most satisfying relationships. It is fascinating to observe how women react to this male distancing. Our answers, although understandable, can often exacerbate the situation instead of improving it. The most common reaction is panic. When we perceive that someone important for us moves away, our nervous system can enter a state of alarm. Evolutionarily, we are scheduled to maintain social connections. The isolation represented a real danger for our ancestors. This panic response is manifested as an urgent need to restore contact and closeness. This panic usually leads to behaviors that, ironically, can push man to distance themselves even more. We begin to send messages more frequently. We constantly seek confirmation of their feelings. We try to cause jealousy, or we even start discussions as a desperate way of generating some type of emotional connection, even if it is negative. Another common response is self-culpa. We begin to question each recent interaction, each word said or not, looking for what we did bad. This critical introspection is rarely productive and can lead to a decrease in our self-esteem and security. We can also fall into overcompensation. When perceiving distance, we try to fill that vacuum, being more attentive, more complacent, more available. Paradoxically, this behavior can be suffocating for someone who is trying to create space to process their emotions. Some women respond with emotional withdrawal as a self-protection mechanism. If he moves away, they move away more, creating a cycle of mutual distancing that can be difficult to break once established. The problem with all these reactions is that they start from an erroneous interpretation of male behavior. We assume that distancing means disinterest or rejection, when it often means the opposite. Jung talked about projection as the psychological mechanism by which we attribute to others our own thoughts, feelings, and motives. When a man distanced and we interpret this as rejection, we are projecting our own fear of abandonment or not being enough. This projection prevents us from clearly seeing what is really happening. Instead of recognizing that your distancing can be part of your process to handle intense emotions, we assume the worst and react from fear. In addition, many women have been socialized to derive much of their value and safety of their romantic relationships. When these relationships seem threatened, it can feel as if our identity itself was in danger. This emotional dependence amplifies our reactions to any removal signal. It is also important to recognize the role that our past experiences play. If you have lived significant abandonments or rejections, especially in childhood, it is natural that the distancing of a current couple activates those old pain and fears. Unconsciously, we can be reacting not only to the present situation, but to accumulated emotional wounds throughout our lives. Attachment anxiety is another crucial factor. People with anxious attachment styles are particularly sensitive to any distance or rejection signal. For them, the normal distancing that a man might need can trigger intense emotional responses that seem disproportionate to the situation. These reactions, although understandable, create a vicious circle. The man distances himself to process his emotions. The woman interprets this as rejection and reacts with behaviors that seek to restore the connection. These behaviors make him feel more need for space, which confirms her fears and amplifies her efforts to reconnect. Breaking this cycle requires consciousness and self-control. It requires that we stop to question our automatic interpretations and consider alternative explanations for their behavior. And most importantly, we require that we stay focused on our own worth and well-being, regardless of the actions of another person. Jung firmly believed that our most intense reactions towards others usually say more about ourselves than about them. When we respond with panic or despair of someone's distancing, that invites us to explore what wounds or insecurities are being activated in us. So how can we effectively handle this dynamic distancing? How do we respond when we feel that someone important is moving away? The key is to balance respect for its emotional processes with the attention to our own needs. The first and most crucial step is to give space. Although it may seem counterintuitive, allowing the time and distance it needs is the most effective strategy. This does not mean completely disappearing or playing emotional games, but genuinely respect your need to process your feelings in your own way and at your own pace. Remember that this space is not a punishment or a sign that the relationship is ending. It is simply part of the natural cycle of intimacy for many men. Giving space communicates trust and security, extremely attractive qualities that strengthen, instead of weakening, the connection between you. The second step is to redirect your energy. When you feel the urgency of sending another message or seeking confirmation, channel that energy towards activities that nourish your welfare and personal growth. Connect with friends, spend time to your passions, take care of your physical and mental health. Not only will it distract you from the anxiety you can feel, but it will remind you that you are a complete and independent person, with or without a partner. Jung talked about the importance of individuation, the process of becoming an integrated and autonomous individual. Paradoxically, the more complete we are as individuals, the more significant our relationships can be. Using this distance to cultivate your individuality not only benefits you, but also create the conditions for a healthier and more balanced relationship. The third step is to maintain an attitude of open curiosity. Instead of assuming the worst, ask yourself, what other explanations could there be for this behavior? Consider that your distancing may be a sign that it is processing deep feelings, not that you are losing them. This open curiosity also extends to your own reactions. Ask yourself, why do I feel so threatened by this distance? What fears or insecurities are being activated in me? This self-exploration can lead you to important discoveries about your attachment patterns and emotional needs. The fourth step is to communicate clearly and not accusatory when it is appropriate. This does not mean bombarding it with questions about your feelings or demanding explanations for your behavior. Rather, it means expressing your own experiences and needs in a quiet and direct way when the moment is appropriate. For example, you could say, I have noticed that you have been more distant lately. I want to respect your space, but I also wanted to let you know that I am here when you want to talk. This type of communication expresses your observations without making accusations and leaves the door open for the dialogue without pressing. The fifth step is to establish healthy limits. Respecting your need for space does not mean tolerating behaviors that are truly harmful or disrespectful. It is important to distinguish between temporary distancing as a natural emotional process and behavior patterns that indicate lack of commitment or consideration. If your distancing is excessively prolonged, if it is accompanied by cruelty or manipulation, or if it is part of a constant pattern of approaching and moving away without evolution, it is perfectly valid to reevaluate the relationship and your expectations. The sixth step is to practice patience. Significant emotional processes rarely resolve overnight. Give not only him to process his feelings, but also yourself to navigate your own emotional responses. Valuable relationships often require periods of adjustment and growth that are not always comfortable or linear. Jung believed that the most significant relationships are those that help us grow and evolve as individuals. These periods of distance and reconnection, although challenging, can deeply strengthen the link between two people if they are handled with maturity and mutual understanding. The seventh step, and perhaps the most important, is to maintain your center. Remember that your value is not determined in case someone chooses to be with you or not. Your happiness and fullness do not depend exclusively on a romantic relationship. Maintaining this perspective will allow you to respond from a place of strength and clarity, not from insecurity or fear. But how can you know if your distancing is really part of the process of developing deeper feelings, or if, on the contrary, you are losing interest? There are some revealing signals that can help you distinguish between these two scenarios. When a man distances himself because he is processing intense feelings, he usually maintains a certain level of connection. Their messages can be less frequent, but they are still significant. You may mention future plans, although more cautious. Their body language when they are together continues to show interest and attraction. And most importantly, after distance periods, it returns with a deeper level of intimacy and emotional openness. It is also revealing to observe how conflicts handled during this time. A man who is distancing himself as part of the falling process will generally continue to show disposition to solve problems and maintain the connection, even if he needs to do it at his own pace. On the other hand, when a man is losing genuinely interest, the quality of communication decreases consistently. The messages become not only less frequent, but also more superficial and generic. Avoid actively make plans or talk about the future. Your body language when they are together shows disinterest or discomfort. Distance periods do not lead to greater closeness, but at more distance. In addition, a man who is losing interest typically shows little effort to maintain the connection. The conversations will be initiated mainly by you, and their answers will be minimal or late. The conflicts will be unsolved or will resolve them superficially only to avoid immediate discomfort. It is crucial to remember that these are general trends, not absolute rules. Each person and each relationship is unique. Some men can be naturally more communicative during their emotional processes, while others may need more space. The important thing is to observe the patterns over time, not isolated incidents. It is also essential to consider the broader context of the relationship. How has you handled emotionally intense situations in the past? How consistent was your behavior in general? Are there significant external factors, such as work stress or family problems, that could be influencing their current behavior? Jung taught us that human relationships are complex and multifaceted. They can rarely be reduced to simple or unidimensional explanations. What seems distancing could be both a process of emotional deepening and a gradual loss of interest, or even a combination of both. The key is to maintain a balanced perspective that honors both your intuitions and the inherent complexity of relational dynamics. Avoid both denial, ignore clear signs of disinterest, and catastrophization, interpret any distance as imminent abandonment. And perhaps the most important thing, remember that regardless of what your distancing means, you are still a complete and valuable person. Your emotional well-being should not depend exclusively on deciphering your intentions or ensuring your constant presence. In the end, a truly healthy relationship is one in which both people can move between closeness and autonomy, connection and personal space in a fluid and respectful way. It is a delicate dance that requires communication, patience, and a shared commitment to mutual growth. Sometimes, after carefully observing patterns and signals, we conclude that the distancing of our partner really indicates a fundamental loss of interest or incompatibility. In these cases, learning to release can be one of the most liberating and transformative acts that we can perform. Dropping does not mean surrendering prematurely or fleeing relational challenges. It means recognizing, with honesty and compassion, when a connection no longer serves our mutual growth and well-being. It is an act of self-love, and paradoxically also love for the other person, whom we free from expectations that can no longer or want to meet. Jung frequently spoke about the importance of symbolic deaths in our psychological development. To grow, we must sometimes allow certain parts of our identity, certain expectations or certain links, to die symbolically. This process, although painful, creates space for new possibilities and ways of being. The process of release begins with acceptance. Acceptance of reality as it is, not as we would like it to be. This includes accepting both the limits of the other person and yours. Accept that loving someone does not guarantee that the relationship will work, or that that person can offer you what you need. This acceptance does not occur overnight. It is a gradual process that often includes negotiation, anger, sadness, and finally a kind of peace. It allows these emotions to flow without judging them. Each one has something important to teach you. A crucial part of release is to reconnect with your own inherent value. During intense relationships, especially those that end with distancing, it is easy to internalize the idea that we were not enough. This belief, although understandable, is fundamentally incorrect. Your value does not depend on the ability or will of another person to remain in your life. You are not less valuable because someone could not or did not want to create with you the relationship you wanted. In fact, recognizing when a connection is not aligned with your needs and values is a sign of a deep self-esteem and personal clarity. Dropping also implies forgiving both the other person and yourself. Forgiving does not mean approving behaviors that hurt you, but freeing you from the weight of resentment and guilt. It means recognizing complex and fallible humanity in both, and choosing not to allow past experiences to dictate your emotional future. An often ignored aspect of the process of release is the duel for the imagined future that will no longer materialize. When we are in a relationship, especially one with potential to be significant, we naturally create mental images and expectations about how our shared life will be. When the relationship ends, we lose not only the present connection, but also all those possible futures that we had visualized. Let yourself cry these losses. They are real and significant, even if they existed mainly in your imagination. This duel is an integral part of the healing process and eventual openness to new possibilities. While you are going through this process, it is vital that you surround yourself with a loving support system. Friendships that listen to you without judging, relatives who respect your process, perhaps mental health professionals who can offer you specific tools for your situation. Isolation intensifies pain. The significant connection relieves and contextualizes it. Eventually, release opens space to rediscover. When we are not focused on deciphering another person's behavior or adapting to their needs, we can reconnect with our own desires, passions, and purposes. You can rediscover parts of yourself that perhaps were in the background during the relationship, or explore completely new aspects of your identity. Jung firmly believed that significant relationships, even and perhaps especially those that end painfully, are opportunities for deep personal growth. Each connection reveals something important about ourselves, about our needs, patterns, and potential. No relationship that has changed us is ever a total loss, even if it does not last. And finally, release creates space for new beginnings. Not only new romantic relationships, although that can also be part of the process, but new ways of relating to yourself and the world. New understandings about what you really value and need. New capabilities to establish healthy limits and communicate your needs clearly. Remember that release is not a unique event, but a continuous process. There will be days when you will feel that you have advanced greatly, and others in which the old patterns and pains resurface strongly. This is completely normal. Emotional progress is rarely linear. It is more like a spiral where we review similar issues, but from increasingly high and expansive perspectives. Throughout this video, we have explored the complexities of distancing in romantic relationships. We have seen how, contrary to what many assume, the departure of a man can be a sign of deep feelings that he is processing internally. We have analyzed our typical reactions to this distancing and how they can exacerbate the situation instead of improving it. We have explored effective strategies to handle these distance periods, emphasizing the importance of giving space, redirecting our energy, maintaining an attitude of open curiosity, communicating clearly when appropriate, establishing healthy limits, practicing patience, and above all, maintaining our center. We have also discussed how to distinguish between the distancing that is part of the process of falling in love and the one that indicates genuine loss of interest. And finally, we have addressed the importance of knowing when and how to release, recognizing that sometimes the most loving act we can perform, both towards ourselves and towards the other person, is to allow the relationship to end with grace and consciousness. Through all this, a fundamental truth emerges. Your value is not determined by the presence or absence of a romantic relationship in your life. You are neither more or less valuable depending on whether someone chooses to be with you or not. Your worth is inherent, unalterable, and complete, exactly as you are now. This understanding does not eliminate the pain we can feel when relationships change or end. Pain is a natural and necessary part of human experience, especially when we have opened our heart to another person. But this understanding does change our relationship with that pain fundamentally. It is no longer a confirmation of our inadequacy, but simply the price we pay for having had the courage to love. Jung believed that true psychological maturity implies the ability to sustain paradoxes, that we can feel pain and gratitude simultaneously, that we can love someone and recognize that the relationship is not healthy, that we can desire deep connection and value our autonomy. These are not contradictions to solve, but polarities to integrate into a more complete and nuanced understanding of human experience. In the end, the most valuable thing we can cultivate is not a perfect technique to maintain the interest of another person, but a love and compassionate relationship with ourselves. A relationship that allows us to move around the world and its inevitable relational ups and downs with grace, authenticity, and open heart. Remember that each experience, even, and perhaps especially, the painful, contains growth and transformation seeds. Each relationship, whether brief or lasting, reveals something important about ourselves, and each end creates space for new beginnings, often more aligned with who we really are and what we really need. Thank you for accompanying me in this exploration of the complexities of love and distancing. I hope these reflections offer you clarity, comfort, and perhaps a new perspective on your own relational experiences. Remember, you are complete, valuable, and worthy of love, exactly as you are now. That is the most important truth that we can remember, regardless of where we are on our relational trip.